So we are back, and let's learn a little bit of that old school wrestling that you know and love. And what we're talking about today are pay-per-views, large events and stuff named after particular wrestlers. This is a transition in time. These are wrestlers that are above and beyond any company, and we saw that with Ric Flair's last match because it's Ric Flair. But let's go through the Heralds of Time to talk about other ones who kind of have that same sort of feel and like. Now, we're going to go really old school here with the rematch of George Hackenschmidt and Frank Gotch for the World Heavyweight Champion in Chicago in 1911. I don't think people realize how big these two were in just sports in general. They promoted this match, and they booked this match for Chicago. It was literally called Gotch Hackenschmidt, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was called the match of the century back in 1911. The tickets sold for around $10 in 1911 money, and they sold out 70,000 people, and this was in a baseball stadium. There was maybe a handful of people that were actually around the ring on the other side. Like, the whole bowl over here was packed full of people. They sold out this thing, and the match itself was riddled in controversy, but the thing is that this was the first indication of a wrestling show that was named after the wrestlers, not a promotion. And before this, it was Carnies, because Carnies ruled wrestling in the early 1900s in America. The original match in 1908 was huge, but it was actually just a wrestling show, not a marquee. This was a marquee match. So this was the first indication of that thing. Now let's go into a tour with somebody who arguably has just as big of a reputation within the wrestling industry as Ric Flair, and that is Hulk Hogan. Now, Hulk Hogan had his Hulkamania Let the Battle Begin tour in 2009, and this was put on by Hogan and Eric Bischoff.
Wasn't this Hulk Hogan's last wrestling tour? Like, his last matches were on this tour?
So the thing is that Hulk Hogan wrestled this was in 2009. Hulk Hogan went into TNA and had some matches with them in like 2011, 2012. So this was actually before Hogan signed with TNA. Now, the original intention was this. So this happened in Australia, and it took place on the 21st, the 24th, the 26th, and the 28th of November in 2009. He faced, ironically, Ric Flair in every single main event of those shows and won every single one of them because it's Hulk Hogan and it's his tour. The original plan for this was actually going to take the Hulkamania tour around. So they actually had plans of doing this in China, in other parts of Asia. They actually even had some stuff scheduled and possibly done in Vietnam. And also they were even thinking doing it in Japan, and they were even talking about Korea. So we might have even actually gotten that Collision in Korea OG match. But because the attendance for this was so poor, they decided not to do that. Because, they were like in Sydney and stuff. And, Australia is just hankering for some wrestling, but not Hulkamania 2009 wrestling. Yeah. So that was just another one. Very similar to what we had with Ric Flair, but it was more so of a tour than it was like an actual just legitimate thing. Now, we're going to go maybe a little more depressing, and that was the Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions. Now, this was in memoriam of David Von Erich, who passed away that year in 1984. Kerry Von Erich won the NWA World Heavyweight Champion against, once again, ironically, Ric Flair, because David Von Erich, who was uber popular at that time, was going to win the NWA World Heavyweight Champion before he passed away in Japan. And they gave a brief history on this event during the Dark Side of the Ring episode on the Von Erich family. The thing that they did not tell you was that this was not the first either Von Erich or Parade of Champions. Well, it was the first Von Erich Memorial, but it was not the first Parade of Champions. There were 4 other Parade of Champions-esque shows promoted by the same company under different names in pretty much the same arena. Now, there were seven Parade of Champions overall, but there were the 4 that was before this one, and then there were 3 others after the original one in 1984. So it was always called the Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions after the first one, and they always held it at the same exact time. And the first one was promoted by Southwest Sports, which was the company named before the WCCW and WCWA. And it was always in front of the, oh God, what was it called? What was the arena that was in?
Oh God, what was it called?
It was somewhere in Texas. Yeah, it was Sportatorium. Thank you. The first Von Erich, I want to give you this picture because this is really an illustration on how quickly WCCW went down between the first Von Erich and the second Von Erich, because they were one right after another for each year, right? The first Von Erich show drew 32,123 people. That's a lot of freaking people for a wrestling event, especially in 1984. The last one drew 7,000 people. Yeah, it was that bad. So, just kind of a thing. Now, here's the thing. And I want to talk about this one because of that drastic thing and also how big the event was. But there are a lot of shows that are named after wrestlers after they die. So, the one thing about Hulkamania's tour was that was the last show that Umaga wrestled before he passed away. But this one is just one of many. So, we had Raw as Owen. We had the Eddie Guerrero tribute show. You had the Chris Benoit tribute show. We'll talk about that one. Well, we're not going to talk about that one, but that one was a little bit different. But there are a lot of shows across the world that do tribute to dead wrestlers. And I think that one is good to illustrate because it's named after a wrestler. Now let's talk about some that are named after groups. And there are more than you think. So let's talk about the one that I really want to talk about was NWO Sold Out.
There are a lot of NWO shows, though.
Well, yeah, I mean,
in the WCW, there were a lot of shows named after the NWO.
Right. And this was just one of them, was NWO Sold Out.
Because this is like, 95 or something?
Yeah,
like
90.
That, right?
It was actually, the first one was in 97 under the NWO banner. There were WCW Sold Out.
Right.
But this was the first NWO promoted one. But this was during the downhill of it in general. Because keep in mind, too, is that they wanted NWO to be its own company. Like Raw and SmackDown, they wanted WCW Nitro and NWO. But they just never really got that. Now, there was one other one that was an example of it named after a group. And that was D-Generation X In Your House. And that goes into the In Your House at the very tail end of its history.
Right.
Because even they named shows after wrestlers. But they did it more cleverly than Von Erich, NWO, etc. This one, with this poster, this was called Rock Bottom In Your House. Obviously, you know who it was named after. But there were a couple of other ones. There was In Your House, Revenge of the Taker. And In Your House, Canadian Stampede, which was a company naming a pro wrestling show after another company. But, you know, there was a Stone Cold one. There were a couple of different ones. Yeah. But, you know, overall, I mean, these are just a couple of examples.
Right, it was In Your House.
Right. These are just a couple of examples of pro wrestling shows that named shows, tours, pay-per-view events after other wrestlers that transcended certain things.
Speaking of which, when we possibly come back,
when we come back, we're going to be talking about
another show that transcends all of wrestling.
Exactly. So that will be when we return.